How far is that? It's about 2 or 3 hours away, so I'm going to be a 5-day ball, and I'm going to come back on the weekends. And
I want to like finish this.
Red ties, eighth grader.
They were like, so.
Is it like anything like refactoring or
Right.
red ties?
Awesome.
Someone who could tie someone off.
Well, welcome everybody to the Heads House. We are a force when women come together and think about changing the world. And today is particularly special. Today is March 31st. Today would have been my mother's 72nd birthday. My mom died on December 25th in 2010, and she asked me a fundamental question right upstairs as she was ending her days. She had very few days left. We knew that. And we would sit together and she would ask me questions. And one of the most profound questions that she asked me just days before she died, she said, "Wanda, why are you here? Why are you here?" And I thought, well, Mom, I'm an educator. I chose this profession very deliberately, but she wanted more than that. She said, "Why are you here? Why do you show up every day? What do you want your girls to be able to do, to feel once you are with them?" I want us to answer that question tonight, in the ways that make sense. Why are we here? Why do we wake up each morning? What will our impact be? What will our footprints look like as we move forward in our lives? And so I'm inspired. I haven't even heard the stories and questions yet, but I already know that this air is going to be punctuated and electrified with inspiring words and questions. And so I want to thank you in advance for being here, to these incredible women. I want to say thank you to these incredible women because I've watched them grow up. And I'm just grateful to Dan Polk, our Director of Global Citizenship, for conceiving of this idea and bringing us to a salon, because this is a Victorian salon. It is a very authentic Victorian salon. So welcome to the salon. I'm going to let Dan make another introductory remark.
It warms my heart, and to hear your words and to see you in this context as 8th graders and as students that I'm working with this year. This is really, it's powerful to bring people together, to talk about social justice, to talk about, global communication and awareness and global citizenship, and how do we make the world a better place. So I really appreciate that everybody is here. We're ready to really launch and to do some great work, and hopefully this is going to plant some of those seeds out there. So. Without further ado, it would be great to have our guests.
I'm Julia Hartz. I'm the co-founder and president of Eventbrite. And Eventbrite is a platform, actually it's now the world's largest platform, to bring people together. So we help people sell tickets to events or registrations to free events. And last year we helped to power 2.5 million events around the world. And much of how I feel like I'm changing the world resides both in the microcosm of the company that I've built and the world and the people we've impacted through providing technology that allows others to come together to, raise awareness, to be passionate together, to learn something, to enjoy their life more. I think that where I really feel like I've made a difference so far, this is the first 10 years of hopefully a multi-decade journey, is in creating a great company. And I think that when I was starting Eventbrite and realizing that, this wasn't just a small idea, this could actually be a business, and then the business could actually be something that was global, and then something that was global could actually employ hundreds of people, I truly felt the sense that I was in a once-in-a-lifetime journey. And I think that for me, the impact of having that mindfulness around when something is really special and being in the moment has meant all the difference in the world to how I've experienced it. And I feel like from where I sit, I have the creative freedom and the empowerment to make decisions for a body of people, about 600 now in 8 offices around the world, to really set the course for what I believe is a great company through and through. Eventbrite is 50-50 male, female, so that's something that I definitely feel a lot of pride for. And 75% millennials, so I'm learning a lot along the way, and I think with the balance of thought and gender, as well as a fresh perspective, I think Eventbrite is on the forefront of redefining the workplace, and so that's what makes me passionate.
So I'm Sammy Rayner, and I'm the co-founder and COO of Hand Up. And before I go into talking about Hand Up, I love, Wanda, that you brought your mother into the room. I want to bring my grandfather into the room. He was a lot of the inspiration for me very young. I got to care for him during his last years of life. He had Alzheimer's. And I remember, like, I was talking to you all about this before. I remember in high school I thought, fashion, I'm gonna like be in New York in heels and it's gonna be great. And I remember getting to college and just something about that didn't sit with me anymore. And I was like, what has brought me the most joy in life? And it was a cold night. I was walking home. I was studying abroad in France, and I just remember his face coming, and I was like, giving back to him has been the most meaningful thing that's created who I am today. It struck a chord with me that I would, be on a path to doing something that meant giving back. That led to my first startup, actually doing microfinance work in West Africa, and seeing global poverty, working in the international development space, really getting a taste for what it can be to create change at a small scale, working very closely with a community, helping lift up other leaders and make their voices the center of the impact we were having. In that journey, I had a huge, saw all this technology sort of leapfrogging what I see here in the States. I saw mobile payments and solar water systems and so much innovation in international development that I didn't see happening in domestic poverty here in the States. And so that was really kind of the corner that turned me to joining Rose Broom, my co-founder at Hand Up. And our platform is a way to give directly to specific individuals who are experiencing homelessness and poverty here in the US. We have phones, we can call an Uber, we can do so much with technology. Why can't we use technology to help people? There's 3.5 million Americans who experience homelessness on a given night in the US, 7,000 just here in San Francisco. What I love about Hand Up is it's not about me, it's about the people and their stories, and really changing that conversation, that making homelessness not just about statistics and numbers, but about the humans, because no human should have to not have a home. So yeah, that's kind of my journey thus far, but I'm excited to share more about what we've learned and the work we're doing.
I'm Jennifer Dulski. I will say I'm also a Hamlin alum. Long time ago, but I graduated from Hamlin in 1985. And my closest friends to this day are the other girls I met at Hamlin. So I hope that you hang on to each other because it means a lot, and it can last a lifetime. My journey, I actually started my career as a high school teacher. So I felt from the very beginning like I wanted to give back and to find a way to empower other people to be their best selves. I actually started a program in Pittsburgh called Summerbridge Pittsburgh. I don't know if they still call it Summerbridge here in SF. Yeah, so I started the Pittsburgh side of that program, which was aimed at helping middle school kids be the first in their families to go to college. And that was a really impactful experience for me. I just loved it, and I got very excited about technology around that time. It was kind of the dawning of the internet, and so I ended up leaving teaching to go into technology. But I remember thinking at the time, I wonder if I will ever have a job that's as fulfilling as this. There was something about, the dawning of the internet and technology that I thought was really exciting in terms of trying to scale the impact that we could make and the way that we could help people all around the world. And so I went to Yahoo in the early days, and I spent time at Yahoo. I did my own startup, and then I spent time at Google before sort of what I think of as coming full circle back to thinking about how to do something really impactful, which is now that I am the president at change.org. And Yeah, I just feel so lucky to have this job. You know, I get to wake up every day and build a technology platform that empowers people everywhere to create the change on the issues that matter to them. And we have 150 million people using it now around the world. They start 1,000 new campaigns every day. People win their campaigns almost once an hour. And it's just kind of incredible to watch what people can do when you give them the tools to take what are these really amazing personal stories that they have and to tell those stories and mobilize other people around them to make a difference. And they're now having real dialogue with elected officials and heads of companies and causing those people to change laws and change policies and, you know, make these massive changes because they now have a way to listen directly to people about what matters to them. And we see people in every age and demographic you could imagine winning these campaigns, people who sometimes never thought they could, and they do. It's totally incredible, including many, many young women like yourselves. This 15-year-old girl from Mississippi who was an athlete, and she saw this ingredient. I guess she drinks Gatorade after her soccer practice, and she saw this ingredient in her Gatorade that she didn't know what it was, and she looked it up and found out that this ingredient had already been banned in all of in Europe and also in Japan, but yet we still allow it in the United States. And it turns out it's a chemical flame retardant that they use to make the drinks brighter. She started a campaign asking Gatorade to remove this ingredient, and she ended up, touring with Dr. Oz. She went on the Today Show, and she ended up successfully convincing not only Gatorade to drop this ingredient, but Powerade, and then Pepsi and Coca-Cola ultimately dropped that ingredient from every single one of their soft drinks. And the great part of the story is that the person from the Center for the Science and the Public Interest, which is a major nonprofit that works on these kinds of things, he was in the green room with this young woman, and he said, you've done in 6 months what I couldn't get done in a decade. Like, he had spent most of his career working on this, and this young woman was able to accomplish this. And so it's very fulfilling to think about what technology now empowers people to do. But it's not the technology by itself. Like, the platform alone just wouldn't do it. It's passionate, courageous people.
My name is Letitia Brown, and I'm also an alumni of Hamlin. I am a community organizer and an activist, and so I mainly organize around the Black Lives Matter movement. In San Francisco, Black people are less than 3% of the city. So San Francisco has the fastest outmigration of Black people since post-Katrina New Orleans, and that was a natural disaster in 2005. So if you put that into context of what that means for people of color in the city, it's mainly around gentrification and displacement. So because of the rising cost of rent, many families can't afford to live here. And so part of what I do as an organizer is I get people together, so different organizations, different community groups, and also just individuals, people, high school, middle school, college. We all come together and we plan marches and rallies. We talk to different city officials to work on policy changes to help to protect families to be able to stay here, and also to bring awareness to issues around like police brutality, so issues that are most pressing, the ones that affect people of color, people who are marginalized, people in poverty. Those issues are oftentimes not what you see on the news when you hear about San Francisco. So that's what I do as a community organizer. And a part of my work, I don't really consider it work, it's more of like it's a lifestyle for me. So once you know something, you can't unknow it. So once you know the truth, you start looking deeper into the truth. Like, oh, why is there poverty? Why is there injustice? Why are there homeless people sleeping on the street? You start to ask those questions. Being at a school like this, it makes you ask those important questions and be a critical thinker. So once you start to do that, you just become more conscious, and you can't like stop you. And so what I wanted to do was think outside the box in terms of how can we create a conversation around these issues. And so I co-founded a festival called the Black Love Festival. It's a music, art, and culture festival that took place in the Bayview in San Francisco. The purpose of the festival was, again, to bring more young people into the conversation around Black Lives Matter. And it was also designed to use love as a form of liberation. We had live music performers, we had bands, DJs, we had live painters, we had a couple of film screenings, we had vendors. This year, I am having a festival again, but it's going to be called Tribe City Fest. And the theme, the reason why I chose that name is to really hone in on the importance of building community. And so what that means is how can we use our power as a group to create social transformation.
My name is Stephanie Ari Burrell, and I am a designer, I am an educator, and I'm an entrepreneur. I come from the East Side. I live in Jersey. I just spent the past 5 years in Brooklyn. Was at school studying design at Parsons New School for Design. So there I got into manufacturing and making of products. And so I had access to a laser cutter being at Parsons. They teach you how to laser cut and get access to all these different cool technologies to make things. And so I started making my own products, but they were geared towards inspiring you. So I see, like, we could wear a t-shirt, we could all wear a t-shirt, we could all wear our shoes, whatever we would like to wear. But there could be some intention behind doing that. So I wanted to sell things that people feel good about wearing, feel good about saying about themselves and expressing about themselves, which is how I believe you change the world. So I wanted to put myself into that and create a line of apparel and merchandise where people can feel inspired about their life and what they're doing every day. So I came up with a line called Do What Feels Right. From that, grew into being a part of a market in Brooklyn. I was involved in a project called Arts East New York Renew Lots. It was rebuilding a community that once was a thriving community, but now for several reasons no longer is the case. So myself, my business partner, banded together with 16 other people, artists and other small business owners, and we came together and formed our own market using shipping containers. And so we had architects come in, build out our shipping containers. We formed a market not only that was rooted in economics, but also entertainment. So we have local musicians and panelists come in, people who are also doing great things in the world come and speak out about what they're doing and sharing their stories with the community. So the Art Cave, which is what was linked to my bio here, is about that.
We have some women, as you can tell, young women who have been diligently thinking about you, reading about you, preparing. So I think that they have some questions they might like to ask, so I'll just leave the floor open.
So I know you talked a lot about like starting a company and how that was a really big deal for you, a really big deal in your life. And I was wondering, what's your advice to us in becoming entrepreneurs that help improve our communities?
Well, it's interesting. I started Eventbrite after having 5 years of post-college work experience. And I had worked, I've had a job since I was 13, so this consistently. So I had a lot of work experience prior to graduating college, but my post-college work experience was exciting, but limited in tenure. So I worked at MTV and then at FX Networks as a television executive prior to starting Eventbrite. And I was 25 when I started Eventbrite, and I had a choice. I could either join a startup cable network here in San Francisco, or I could do what was really pitched to me by my then fiance, now husband, and co-founder. And he said it to me this way. Basically, I received an offer from the startup cable network, and the responsible thing to do would have to have continued on that path, because that's the career I had built or had started to build, and this was a good opportunity. And they gave me an offer that was less than what I was currently making in my job. And I was young, right? I was a junior executive. And I paused because I think that it's really important to understand what your worth is. And I didn't know what I was worth. And I actually wasn't even at the point of being able to advocate for myself because I hadn't gone to a school like Hamlin. But it did at least make me pause. And when I paused, that's when my partner, Kevin, came sort of swooping in and made the pitch that he put it this way: you can go work for someone else and on someone else's dream and make very little money or less than what you think you're worth. Or we could do something together. We could make no money and we could put all of our savings into bootstrapping this idea and sort of go all for broke. And I think that I don't remember the point at which I decided that was a better route. I actually cannot reconstruct the moment because I think he might have tricked me. But I think that when I try to reconstruct the moment, the elements I know were there was a fearlessness and a willingness to take risk. Even though I was I generally speaking am very risk averse. I was a ballerina growing up. I'm very good at taking direction and doing what I'm told and pleasing people and like staying on my rails. But that was a moment that was so incredibly important to me and taught me, now looking back 10 years later, that it's really important to be fearless. And I think it's been ingrained in you to be fearless. You are Hamlin women, you have no choice. So you might as well just leave your fear at the door because there's no place for it in your life. And for me, it was almost a fluke that I had that moment, but I really am grateful for that. And I think that when we decided to start Eventbrite, we really did start Eventbrite with the express intent to create something that would democratize an industry. And I think one of the most gratifying parts of this whole journey is that Eventbrite is a manifestation of exactly what we wanted to create. And that's not always the case. Sometimes you have to pivot and you have to change your business model, and that's a good thing. You should evolve forward. But it's pretty powerful when your original idea is something that can actually stand on its own 2 feet.
I have the startup experience, which wasn't immediately successful and didn't necessarily have decades of runway on the initial idea. This is not Change.org, but a company that I used to run called the Deal Map, which we ended up selling to Google. But it failed probably like 3 or 4 times before it was successful. We changed the name of the company 3 times. We changed the idea of the company 3 times. And the key thing, as you point out, it's not exactly fearlessness. It's like the idea that being afraid and doing it anyway is okay, right? Like, of course you're gonna be scared. Like, my advice to people is always do as many things as that scare you as soon as you can. Like, the earlier in your life you do lots of things that scare you, the easier it becomes to do other things that will scare you. Because it's not that they won't be scary, but it's that the worst case scenario just isn't that bad. Like, when I went to start that company, I thought, okay, well, what happens if it fails? Like, do I still have like family and friends that are gonna love me anyway? Yep. Do I, am I like relatively healthy? Do I have a place to live? Like, the answer to all those questions was yes. And so it just didn't matter if I failed. And as it turns out, I sometimes refer to myself as too stubborn to fail because I just kind of kept going until we made it work. But even if it hadn't, I knew it would be okay and that I would take, learning from that and use it for something else. So.
Was there a defining moment in your childhood when you knew you wanted to change the world as your job, and do that every day?
I have this belief that people have these natural talents, things they're really naturally good at that come out when they're kids. And I don't mean talent like they're good at playing piano or whatever, which can be a talent. I mean like the way that you go about doing things. Like for instance, when I look at my two kids, I have one who's like a natural conflict resolver. Like she's always the one who's helping her friends figure out how to deal with their arguments. And I have another one who's like extremely patient and diligent. She'll do something like for hours on end without having to change tasks from one thing to another. Like they're these little underlying things, and that it's sort of finding those things that creates the magic in your life over time, because the things that you're naturally good at, that come easily, that light you up when you do them, are the things that end up making you happy and successful. And if you can take those things and put them towards doing good for other people, there is really nothing like it, because all the research out there and everyone up here would tell you that like there is no greater joy than helping other people. And I think you guys already know that in all the projects you do and the ways that you think about life. But the key is, I think, putting those two things together. And it took me a long time to figure that out, right? Like I started my career as a teacher, which turns out to be the thing that I was naturally good at anyway. And then I left that career when I was 25 and went to go do something else. And it turns out that teaching was the thing that really lit me up all the way along. And so now as the president of a company, I teach in different ways, but my job is basically to teach and empower other people to do their jobs. And so I think it's less about like, do you want to change the world, and more about how do you use your unique talents to go do that.
So from all of this information, I was wondering if, like, in what ways have you seen the impact of your organization or company in your society, and like how you've seen like the work that you've done?
We were able to have organizations from the UN come into East New York and see what we were doing as a model for places like in India, places in Africa, to be able to take something cost effective like a shipping container and beautify a space. So we when we started the project, everybody who was in, we were just in. Like we didn't know where it was gonna go, how the community was gonna receive it. It was underfunded. We had some grants from the government from New York City, but it was still something that we kind of had to just, all right, everybody put their hands in and let's do this. Let's make this work. Let's do something that has never been done before.
When trying something new, I think that oftentimes you can maybe face setbacks or challenges when you're building a company. And so what are some important lessons that you think you've learned from all these setbacks, or that you think would be helpful to people or oncoming entrepreneurs or people who just seek to make a difference?
I realize that there will always be what you perceive as a problem in your life. And it's important to be a problem solver and to really tackle your problems head on and not put your head in the sand like an ostrich. And once you realize that there will always be problems, then you feel empowered. Like, okay, here's an obstacle, but what are my resources that I have available to me to overcome this obstacle? Who can I contact that can help me overcome this obstacle? Because if you're passionate about something, if you have a desire to do something, then nothing will get in your way. You may have to take a different route to get there, but nothing will stop you from getting to your destination. And so I would say to make a list of your network. Your network is your net worth. Have you ever heard that phrase? So this is your network. The people sitting around you, the people in this room are your network. And so it's important to be able to understand how you can be in symbiosis with people around you. So how can we all benefit from our unique talents? How can we all put our hands in the pot to get a project completed? Even if it's not my project, I want to help you with your project because it's something that you're passionate about. I believe in it too. And maybe further down the line, I'll need help from you. You never know. But I think it's important to build your network even from a young age.
One of the biggest realizations for me, I'm can be slightly impatient, and when you're trying to do any kind of social change, it takes a lot of time. And so I think that, yeah, so on the advice is like, if you let the one little barrier get in your way, you're not going to get toward this really big goal. And the really big goal can feel really like, how can I ever get there? And so I think just like, you know, I'm someone who really believes in meditation. I wake up every morning and I meditate for 10 to 20 minutes. And just to be reminded, like, be right here in this day. What are you going to do in this day that's going to take one step? And if I can just do that and not have to think about, okay, what are the like 25 more steps that I have to get to, I think that that's been a really big, you know, I think big change for me. I've seen even, you know, my last company, I did not do that every morning. And I think it caused me to trip on myself a lot more. And I've seen such a difference in the way I am to the people around me and the way that I take those small steps that now are adding up to be a lot, just because I'm in the moment, rather than being so worried about, oh, I'm gonna mess up, and I know that. So I think that's just having that self-compassion is such an important part of doing any change work.
There may be really good days and really bad days, and knowing up front that both will be true and both are temporary is kind of part of the thing, right? So some days are like really sunny and I brought a picnic lunch and I can see the top and everything's awesome today. And then the next day something bad happens that I wasn't expecting, and it's like there's a huge storm and I'm back at the bottom and I have this giant backpack. And the key is both days you keep going up, like you just keep going up, and the next day might be sunny. And so having that faith, and I couldn't agree more on the asking for help thing. Like, we aren't climbing the mountain by ourselves, and that's been one of the things that has been the biggest learning for me actually at change.org, is that the power is sometimes in the vulnerability, right? Like, it is the people who are the most honest about what's happening with them and the help they need from others that are most effective at mobilizing other people around them, because people want to help when you're willing to ask for it.
Changing the world is like a very abstract idea, like a lot of people talk about, like, oh, when I grow up I just want to change the world, and so I was wondering if any of you ever had a moment when you actually realized and like saw the difference and realized that you were actively changing the world, and if you did, could you just describe that moment a little bit?
I organized a conference for people in San Francisco to rally around or be involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. And the conference was at the Southeast campus of City College. And we did a lot of guerrilla flyering. So we went and knocked on doors in different neighborhoods where there's like high concentrations of poverty. We talked to people at bus stops. So we really made an effort to do a lot of grassroots outreach. And so a lot of people showed up who are not normally at these types of conferences. And that was really great. And one guy, after the conference, he said that he's never been around young people who care about changing the world. And he said that this conference inspired him to want to make a change in his community. He was formerly incarcerated. He was looking for work. And he started to come to meetings that I had organized for community organizing events and rallies and things like that. He started to come to meetings. He found a construction job, and he did this. Like, anytime he was not working, he would be doing community organizing. And he still does community organizing, and he always talks about how being at that conference changed his whole life. He changed his entire network because of that conference. All of his friends now are activists and organizers, and he's someone who never saw himself being a part of an organizing community. And so that was really awesome for me to be able to witness how creating a space for people to come together actually does make a difference.
One thing that I struggle with here is, even though there are clear examples of ways that we are making a difference. I mean, I do see this every day, people winning these campaigns. It still feels like it's not enough a lot of the time, right? Like, it's so easy to look around and see how much injustice still exists and how much we're not tackling and so forth. So the key is like the self-love thing again. Like, you just got to say every little bit does matter. And, you know, it's sort of all together that we're going to tackle the depth of this, of all these issues. I'll say that like, if I were to go back to a moment, it's actually when I was teaching that I had sort of the clearest representation of this. And there was a boy that I had been working with, and his mother wrote me this letter that said, "It's a sink or swim world, and you've taught my son how to swim." And it was just like, oh, you know, one of those things where, like, so rarely do people take the time to actually say that you've made a difference. A lot of this is like, you gotta just believe it and keep going with it and so forth. But it's an interesting sort of lesson to all of us that actually saying it to other people when they make a difference for us too matters, and letting people know that they're making a difference to you, to us.
For any and all of you, has there been a particular person or influential figure in your life that has really changed the course of your life and impacted your work?
It's actually my partner and my husband, Kevin. And, you know, it's often, I often don't talk about that publicly because, I don't know, it doesn't feel very sort of popular to say that. And it's the truth. I you know, met Kevin when I was 23, and he's 10 years older than me, which felt like a lot back then, and now it doesn't feel like a lot at all anymore. But he was that person in my life who always believed I could do anything. And I came from a very supportive family, but this was, in my mind, an objective person who loved me but wasn't my parent. You know, now that I'm a parent, I understand the sort of irrational love that you have for your child, and of course they can do anything because they are an extension of you. He would always say straight face to me, well, yeah, no, you should do that. And you know, I'd never started a company before. Obviously, I hadn't even dreamt of starting a company. I wasn't even the kid with the lemonade stand. I was the ballerina, right? So I was very good at moving up the corporate ladder. And when we started Eventbrite, I had no idea what I was doing. We were sitting in a windowless conference room in Potrero Hill in a warehouse, and I was just staring at a computer going, now what? And Kevin said, well, why don't you work on customer acquisition, customer, you know, support and finance, you know, and you know, just kind of figure it out. And I thought, like,
Those like 4
okay,
right there.
that's what you do as a founder. And so I did that, and I learned something about myself in the process of 2 years of really being all three of those functions. I love to learn by doing. And it opened up this part of me that I hadn't necessarily fully realized in my schooling years, that I really love to learn by doing. That is so important to me. And so as we built the company and as we hired more people and as I continued to take on crazy challenges, it finally dawned on me, this is only like a few years ago, so I was a little slow to pick up on this, that Kevin's just crazy. Like, he didn't actually think I could do all this stuff, but he did, but he's crazy optimistic enough to really not even consider the outcome that I would fail. And that was so potent for me, because I didn't pick up on the fact that, you know, maybe one of those times I would have failed, or I did fail and I learned a lot. But having someone who just, like, through every bone in his body believes that I can do anything was so incredibly impactful for me.
Did you face any challenges where someone would really try to push you not to pursue what you wanted, and maybe even tried to physically or using a company that they own to try to bring you down? And can you elaborate on what happened and how you dealt with it?
I'm in the printing world, so it's a very male dominated industry. And so for two women to open up a print shop, like, people look at us like we're crazy. So I think in having, not caring about what other people, because everybody's going to have an opinion of you. Even without knowing you, people are going to have an opinion of you, but it's important for you to know yourself. So just taking time, like she said, she meditates. That's a good thing to do because you get a chance to know yourself. You get a chance to sit with yourself. You get a chance to ask questions and hear the answers and have a dialogue that extends beyond anybody else's opinion of you. And so we're all unique in that we all have our own stories. And when we're faced with those challenges where people are projecting their limitations and their lack of God in themselves, you can kind of stand in your own power and know like what's true for you.
Earlier in my career, when I was at a bigger company, and I was already at a pretty senior level. I was, a senior vice president in the marketing function, and I decided that I wanted to change jobs because I didn't think it was the right career fit for me. And so I found another job in the company as what's called a general manager, and I applied for and got that position, and it turns out it was 2 levels below the job I already had. And I had a conversation with the person whose job it was then to decide whether I had to essentially take a demotion. Like, nobody ever gets demoted at work, but that's what they wanted me to do, is take a 2-level demotion, give up a senior vice president title and take like a director title, and take less money, all of that. And I had the same kind of moment, like, I tried first to explain to them why I thought that was not the right decision and how I had already, I had become a leader within the company. I had been there and dedicated years of my life already to this company. And I thought the right thing to do was to cross-train people, to say, okay, you should be able to take this opportunity in this new job without having to sacrifice your pay and your status and so forth. And they really did not agree with me. Which I thought was very closed-minded, but, and then I had this question of like, okay, what do I do? Do I believe in myself? Do I take this chance? Is this something I want for my career, even though it comes at a cost? Or do I stay where I am and keep the nice salary and the title that I have and so forth? And we ended up compromising, so I only took a 1-level demotion, not 2, but I took the demotion, I changed my title, I took what I think a lot of people thought was a pretty stupid move and a big risk. And I did it because I believed in myself, and I really wanted to know whether this was the right move. And it turns out within 18 months, so a little bit over a year, we tripled the size of that business that I was running. And then they promoted me back to the level I was before, and they gave me 6 other businesses to run. And, part of me wanted to be like, Right, exactly. But like, it was probably the best career decision I ever made. It put my whole career on a different trajectory. And so like, sometimes even when other people are trying to hold you down, you just got to keep going. And sometimes it has a cost, and you do it anyway.
What are your future goals for your company? Like, do you think that your company has already reached like its full potential, or do you have any ways that you are going to further your business?
That's a great question. Something that is part of what like gets me up every morning, because as I've said, change takes a lot of time, and it's sometimes easier to look at like all the things I still want to do, and still remember to be proud and happy with what we've accomplished so far. Our dream with Hand Up and where we want to take this is really looking at, how do we democratize and make the way that money goes to people experiencing homelessness and poverty? How do we make that a more transparent system? So right now, we're doing that on a very small scale, like helping when you donate, when you're someone, in the public, you give to a charity and you're like, well, I think I kind of know where this dollar is going, but you're not totally sure what's the path of that dollar. And this happens, the challenge around poverty programs in the US is a lot of the money doesn't really get tracked or isn't really clear on how those funds are being spent. And so where we want to go with Hand Up is looking at not just the individuals in the community who are giving back, but looking at larger foundations or government sources of funding and building technology that makes it really transparent and clear to see when I want to impact homelessness in a community, I can see every dollar and where it's going and how it's being spent. So yeah, that's the direction that we want to go in. So one example is like food stamps. There's billions of dollars that are spent on food stamps every year. And a lot of money is spent on payment processing. So when you want to go, or if your food stamps is an example, welfare is an example, there are big banks in this country that manage those programs. So every time you take out money, you get charged a transaction fee on your welfare or your food stamps. And that's not right. We think that those programs, as much of those programs, should be preserved for the people who need them. So that's like the very, very North Star. We don't really publicly, necessarily talk about that as much, but that's something that's really
That sounds like a good petition.
Where we want to go.
Seriously.
I'm wondering if there's any questions that our guests might have of our students. And also if there's anything that you'd want to share that you're taking in. I know that we'll do some reflective work tomorrow and maybe even a little bit next week, because I know there's a lot to absorb here. I mean, we're hearing things from people's past, from their present, from their future, from really the ethos of who they are. But in this moment, I'm sure some of you are digesting some of this. So if there's anything you either want to share that you're taking from the conversation, or we can have maybe one of the panelists ask a question. Either way, is anybody feeling something they want to share?
I loved what Jen said about not necessarily knowing what you're going to do or what you want to be, but understanding what your sort of special qualities are. And I call that superpowers because I think it's fun, and I think that you should own your superpower. My superpower is empathy, but I want to know what your superpower is.
One of my superpowers is probably honesty, which is also one of the words in the creed, because I feel like it's always really important to be honest with my friends, with my family, and probably courage, especially something we learned at Hamlin, being able to stick up for ourselves, which is also a skill that we're going to need to learn again and again later on in life.
My superpower would also be courage, because I'm going to be honest, there's a lot of influence. Law and order and lawsuit cases, I like those. But it's also a thing where my family has taught me to stand up for myself, since I come from a family that's predominantly African American, if not completely African American. Both my parents were born on the East Coast, and they had to fight to do what they wanted. My grandparents had to fight. My grandfather was jailed because he was one of the men who sat at the counters when Jim Crow was still in process. So it's always been standing up for yourself, no matter what, except for my mom. She's like, don't do that. But it's like, shut your mouth. But it's always been making sure that you get your point across, and that you make sure that you kind of extend yourself to the fullest level.
I remember Ms. Dulski said that she was too stubborn to quit. And I think that's something that really hits home for me, just this kind of a drive, when something just doesn't get done, you just have to keep going until it gets done, or if it fails over and over, rather than just giving up, or just trying to, close your mind and just stop and shut down. You just have to keep pushing through, and I think that's something that Hamlin has taught me, and I think I would say that's a superpower.
Adding on to Amity, I also think kind of drive and hard work is one of my superpowers, because I feel like just working hard definitely just gets a lot done and you feel a lot better about yourself. And whether I'm just completing a project or a homework assignment, I always feel like I need to do like my best job and put kind of all of my energy into it just to make sure that and I'm really completing everything.
My main superpower would probably be independence, because I remember from a very young age I've wanted to be able to do something by myself. And of course that doesn't mean never asking for help, but I've always wanted to be able to complete it and do my best work before I actually need to go ask my parent or a friend or a teacher to help me with an assignment or a certain task. And I think that's helped me, and Hamlin's helped me to hone in on like how independence just kind of develops my character and how I see the world.
I don't know if this is my superpower, but something that's really important to me is compassion, which is also in the creed, and it's a big value of my family. And also, something that's like really important to me is like children, and I think just like being compassionate towards children in the world that they're growing up in. My RTC project, my Rising to the Challenge project, was like trying to solve the issue of homelessness in San Francisco, and I researched Hand Up for my project, which is really cool. But something that I really like was in the back of my mind the entire time, and I did like a little bit of volunteer work at Hamilton with kids on Friday afternoons that were staying in Hamilton. Just like how can I raise them out of a bad cycle and kind of help them. This kind of relates to compassion, something that's really important to me.
I think that I have organizational skills, and this helps me to set personal goals so I can keep moving forwards, because as Ms. Rainer was saying, the little steps do matter. The baby steps do push you towards something bigger. This is important in my life, academically, at home. Setting these small goals towards a bigger ultimate goal has really helped me in my life.
For me, I'd say one of my main superpowers would be resiliency, since I have always had ups and downs, whether it's in like school life or friendships or at home, and I've learned that no matter like where is the rock bottom for that moment, there's always like a good thing that will happen next, and like not to give up and to keep on trying.
It's amazing.
So inspiring. Wow.
Well, that's, I mean, that,
I
you
think
might
we
have
should
said
end
my
on
thoughts.
that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a good place to stop. So, thank you.
As an alumna, coming, gosh, I'm 53 now, so I went to Hamlin's a long time ago, and I just still live a block away, so I'm so lucky to be able to come in and visit with Dan and try to spread the word about what you all are doing to the alumni. And I just had this image, because for me tonight it felt like plugging back into this great energy. And you'll go out in the world and you'll it's not like Hamlin's, it's like it's gonna be like the world's not on board with this train, and so have heart, and do plug back in. I think that's really important to do. So that's just all I wanted to say is thank you, because you inspired me and gave me some energy, and I'll take it out to the old creaky alumni.
Eve, come on, you're at the back row with us.
I might be in the back.
All right, losing Julia a little bit. All right. All right. Okay, let's get one more. Beautiful. Really beautiful. Wonderful. And one more. Let me get the t-shirt. Oh yeah. Oh, that's the one. That's it. Boom, boom.